Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, continuing on with our team-by-team series. We've got the Essendon Bombers second preseason team and Supercoach chat. We have a special guest from InsightFSports, Supercoach Horse. How are you, mate?
Swizz, thank you. Appreciate the invite and looking forward to talking about the Bombers who, it's been 7,000 days. Surely we get one finals win soon.
I'd love to say yes, that is the case, but it might be a bit of a negative. As most of my viewers know, my wife is very passionate Essendon, and she did tell me off last time talking about the Bombers, saying when I kind of had them ranked as low as I did. So I've got to be more upbeat. So I'm going to try to be that with you today. Before we jump into that, as always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube, Spotify. Get in contact with us via Supercoach Insider 100 or Swizz26 for me directly. Mate, where can the good people find you?
InsightFSports on Twitter, on all good social media platforms, YouTube, and also all audio as well. We do NBA, AFL, NRL, BBL, you name it, we do it.
You sure do. I love that. All right, the Bombers, mate. Expectations for this year. Let's start off with that. What are you as a fan thinking for the Bombers 2025?
I see this as a year of growth. So for Essendon, I think they've gone away where they're starting to look at who's going to be part of their next premiership side. Or I could lessen that back a little bit. Who's going to be part of their next finals winning side? So the Stringers have left the club. Your Hines gone. So people who are probably affecting the way that the mentality of the players were on field and a bit of the chemistry. So out with that and in with some really exciting young players that I think Essendon's going to be one of those teams that, yeah, it'll be a bit of a yo-yo year, but when they're up and about, they're going to be really exciting to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I think Rosa coming in has been good for the club, where there seems to be a clear direction. I feel like teams, Essendon, Adelaide, St Kilda, there's a multitude of clubs like that who continue to top up their list to try to be competitive around that finals mark. And as much as we don't want a competition where you've got sort of 5-6 great teams and 5-6 rebuilding teams, and there's a massive gap between sort of the top and the bottom, it's probably shown enough over history outside of Geelong, who've been awesome at kind of recruiting, that you need to bring talent through the draft and actually invest in that and getting the right mix and opportunity with your group. And I feel like the Bombers have definitely started to do that in the last couple of years, and trying to find that A-grade talent who can bring the club forward and you build around is definitely high on the agenda now.
Yeah, I think you're right, Swizz. And we're talking about the young recruits that they brought into the club the last couple of years. Your Caddies, your Cacos, who I think will start round one. Archie Perkins, Nick Martin's still young. There's a lot of youth in the club. The rookies that they brought in last year, all high character guys. They've got good attitudes. They're spoken well about in the AFL circles. So, and with Tassie coming in a couple of years' time, the time to reset and to bring youth in is now, before all those draft picks get transferred across to Tassie and we ultimately miss out. So with 2 first-round picks coming in the next round, Essendon and Melbourne's, I think the youth movement is spot on for Essendon this year.
Yeah, and I said that to my other half and her family. A couple of my closest mates are Essendon supporters. Like, is it like, I know you're so desperate. It's been 20 years. You want that finals win. But wouldn't you rather a little bit more short-term pain? Like, who cares that you get that one finals win and then belt out straight away and just be a mid-table team, and then Tassie come in and then you're further down, where you've got the 2 draft picks. Melbourne, if a couple things go wrong, could definitely finish bottom 6, bottom 4 for sure. Is it better just to have sort of put some more games in some of these young fellas, get them playing the brand that you want? And if you could reload with sort of 2 top 5-6 picks going into the future before Tassie comes in, a little bit more short-term pain to go the long-term game might not be the world's worst thing.
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, I think that's, and I get the supporters. And if you're a supporter who thinks the other way, no problems at all. I get it. I completely understand it. And it's easier for me to say because most people out there do know I support Richmond. I've seen the 3 flags. Much easier situation for us to sit there and go, okay, we're going to be absolutely awful for the next 2 or 3 years, but get it right before Tassie. But unfortunately, there can only be one flag premier each year. And, there's only sort of 4, 5, 6 teams that are realistically competing. And I feel like this is the moment right now where you're leading into Tassie, where those mid-table teams are making a decision right now, and they're either going, we're all in, or we're going the other part. And I feel like Essendon trading out that pick to get that second pick, which I think the Melbourne pick was a good one, because I do feel like they might struggle this season. I feel like long-term it could work.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do like the way that Essendon have gone about it this off-season. And as an Essendon supporter, I'll be the first one to say that I've been frustrated with the lack of final success that we've had over the past 20 years. But you talk about 7,000 days, whether it's within the next 180 days or whether it's 480 days after that, if we can gain sustained success for an amount of time instead of just that once-off finals win, I think that'll bode better for us as a footy club and a footy community moving forward.
I couldn't agree more, mate. And we'll go through that 23, get your thoughts in a moment. But I think there's still enough. There's a good mix. There's some older guys who can teach the younger guys. And there is some good, high-quality young talent starting to come through. So obviously McGrath, Mackay, Ridley, question marks about Ridley and his injury. We've got back by the end of preseason, but there will be question marks there. We know they might take the long-term approach with him because we've had the soft tissue injuries with him before, but he's there for now. Redmond, Zachy Reid looks like he's doing everything right this preseason. He should be there for opening round, which is good because, obviously a lot's invested in him. Dylan Shield makes his way back to half back, which is obviously an interesting move there. We'll talk more about that soon. Nick Martin then comes further up the ground, up onto a wing, but I wouldn't be surprised if he sort of rotates through that midfield or half forward line. Durham, Dersma's locked in on the wing. Perkins, Caddy. We've moved Kako up to the half forward line just to kind of give him a little bit more freedom up the ground. This kid's got a lot of spark about him. Gresham, Langford, and with 2 meter Pete's come in. I know there was a couple of Essendon supporters that might choke me for that, but he does provide some good support up in that forward line. But that probably is the spot that could be interchangeable. Draper, Caldwell, Merritt. We've still got El Hawley in because I think he's what Essendon do need. He offers that support on the wing and the half back line, but has been struggling this preseason, as you'll see there by a Nerds trading report. He probably doesn't look a lock, but there's still time, obviously, for the young fella. I've got both Parrish and Sardis there, but there's potential that only one play. And Parrish might not even get up for round 0. So there's a bit of a watch on his back, but we've still got them there for now. And Nick Bryan, who's actually been really good through the preseason. And I know Essendon do like those 2 rucks with Roberts as the sub. Davey going down was probably a bit of a blow because I thought he'd been having a ripper preseason, still might come in early. Guilfey's obviously gone until at least mid-season. And then a couple of the other injuries, plus a few minor ones. Durham, Caldwell have been sort of struggling with a couple of things, but they should be right come these match sims. Thoughts, mate?
We'll start with the back line, and we've got the lockdown type of McGrath down there alongside a bloke that should never kick the footy, and that's Mackay. Great one-on-one. He's good. He's a good nullifier, but when it comes to disposal, get it in someone else's hand. So we're looking at Jordan Ridley there, who's a nice user of the ball. Dylan Shield, who we'll talk about in a sec. Zach Reid is an interesting one, and Mason Redmond. Redmond likes to push further up the ground, and his penetration of his kicks to inside forward 50, from back of centre, sort of allow Essendon to keep that forward line open and puts defences on the back foot, given that he can kick 60, 65 on the run and gain some real penetration. So I like him there across half-back flank. But Dylan Shield first, he's an interesting one, Swizz. So I haven't been his biggest fan, open, transparent about that. I think the halfback role will actually suit him because you see the way that he plays through the midfield, and he's not necessarily a tough in and under type of player. He's got clean ball use, so he can use the ball quite well. But as an outside player, if he's 5 to 10 metres off the back of the pack, getting that seagull handball out the back in order to be able to run his 5 or 10 and then use the ball, I feel like that may suit his game a little bit more than previously in the midfield. And you look, Durham, Merritt, Caldwell, he's not better than any of them in the midfield. So he needed to find another spot in this team if he was to play consistent senior footy, and I feel like this probably suits him quite well.
Yeah, for sure. It's sort of he's not, 32 years old. It's not like he's a spring chicken, but at the same time,
No.
we've seen some players move back to halfback, like Zorko, for example.
Zorko, yep.
And still have really good careers. Collingwood is still like playing around with the idea of Pendle's going in back there, but he's been so good in that midfield for a while. But to sort of have that guy, but I think Essendon's been crying out for it. We know Zach Merritt's trained a little bit back there, and I talked about this in the last Essendon pod about the fact that I can see him going down there for the last sort of 3-4 minutes of a quarter, because Essendon do seem to give up a lot of red time goals. They probably don't as compared to other teams, but I always seem to be like, I'm always at Essendon games, and it always just feels like a situation where 27, 28 minutes on the clock and they're still trying to take the game on to score. But then yes, they do sometimes, but other times they get the turnover, and I feel like a little bit more settled ball just to get to those three-quarter time breaks. And Dylan Shield can offer that as well, just that experienced player, just to just take a bit of pace off the game. And I think that'll bode well for them, where say Nick Martin, who was playing that role last year, as good of a player, and I really like Nick Martin, he probably doesn't have that little bit of that skill set to just calm down. Let's a bit of slow ball, let's not turn the ball over and risk that. He does take on some of those risky kicks which do turn the ball over, and I think he'll be more beneficial further up the ground. So I think the move's good for this season.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then alongside him, Zach Reid. So people may hate on this, but I really like it. And if he continues to have an injury-free preseason and then come into round 0, round 1, I can see from a Supercoach point of view, he could average his 70, 75, 80s. He's got a big body. He's over 6'7". He's got really nice foot skills for a big guy. Being an Essendon supporter, I'm probably being a bit biased, but there's probably not many 6'7" blokes that can use the ball on both sides of the foot or the body, that Zach Reid can. So from a supporter's point of view, he's probably up there alongside Kako, that if he stays injury-free, he's going to be really exciting for us this year.
Yeah, like nobody likes to see young players get injured, especially with talent like that. I think you think Sam Taylor, my boy Gipkus, Zach Reid, you just want to see them get some continuity with their football to see what they can deliver, because it's not the talent that's lacking. It's just the bodies that let them down. And Sam Taylor's one of the best centre halfbacks in the game. There's no reason why Zach Reid, with a good run of it, couldn't become that sort of player for the Bombers. Obviously invested a high pick into him. Fingers crossed, because if he stays in the park, he'll be able to be a good option for us.
For sure.
And then we move up the ground there, mate.
Yeah, so Nick Martin, I like the fact that they're bringing him up the ground. So we've seen in intra-club matches so far this season, Swizz, that he has been starting on a wing, but he sort of rolls around the stoppage and plays as that out. So you've got the person who's at the bottom of the pack, dishes out the quick handball. He's the one that they're looking to get the ball in the hands of to deliver inside forward 50. So this may shock a few people, but he was number 1 at Essendon for hitting targets inside forward 50 last year. So they do rate his disposal efficiency forward of centre. So I reckon being up the ground, that's just going to make him more damaging. From a Supercoach point of view, he may not rack up the scores that he did in the back half, but from a team perspective and from us being Essendon supporters, it's more damaging for us, and it's going to be more exciting to see him forward of centre.
100%, mate. I'm butting there with Martin, because he's outside of Zach Merritt, he's my favourite Essendon player to watch. I get very excited when he gets near the ball. He's just he can scoreboard impact by either kicking goals or giving those assists, and it's amazing where there's some guy who it's like you take him out of the defensive 50 and all of a sudden he finds targets so much better. It's a real funny one, because you'd think sometimes like players go back and they improve their disposal efficiency of halfback. I don't know if it naturally like finding the ball, not a problem in the world, but I don't know if it actually suited him being back there just because maybe the game style and whatever. So I think the Bombers are better off, and we saw that first game against Geelong when he kicked the 5 goals.
That's right.
How if he's left alone and not given the attention that he probably needs, and you'll probably get times like that where people concentrating too much on your Zach Merritts and even if Dursman's getting off, or young Kako or Gresham, you've got some weapons down there. You wouldn't want to give him too much space, because he can definitely find the sticks.
Yeah, not at all. Last year, I kind of do feel sorry for him in a way because he was getting fed the ball a little bit, but I think it was because it needed to happen. You look at the likes last year, Ben Mackay, Jaden Laverty, was it Jake Kelly that
Yeah,
was
he was
down there
playing a
as
bit
well.
halfback wing. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
those guys couldn't kick to save themselves. So when we're talking disposal efficiency, they'd be all in the bottom tier when it came to that in the AFL. So it was more out of necessity that he was getting as much of the ball down back as he has, or that he did last year. Ridley, Redmond, they were both injured at separate times throughout the year. So with that being settled down there, hopefully with Ridley, Redmond, Shield, Reed, McGrath, even on a good day, can use the ball quite well. It all of a sudden opens up a lot more avenues coming out of D50 for Essendon.
Yeah, and that's how footy's played these days. Like all attack comes from the halfback flank, so
For sure.
you do need to have really good ball users, and that's why I was saying really, like, even in Merritt, if he's floating back a little bit there to support, you've got guys who can definitely kick the ball, and if Mackay or Reed, like Reed's fine himself, but if Mackay takes that intercept mark, it's quickly dish off and get into the hands of one of these guys, and then all of a sudden that wing half forward line looks so much stronger with the inclusion of these players.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we've got Sammy Durham, picked up from Richmond's rookie list. I apologise to all Richmond supporters, but he's like Brad Pitt. He's so good.
But I loved him. I actually put out a tweet. I think a few people replied to it when I said the amount of great players that have come through our VFL system in recent years that we haven't managed to pick up and it was just an unfortunate thing. Mid-season draft, you guys were a spot below us, and you took the player that needed to go because he's an absolute beaut. So I do enjoy watching Sammy Durham. There's no hate there at all. So for a Tiger, and I'm usually sitting pretty close to the bench for Essendon games, so I do love watching Sammy run on the ground and do his thing through the midfield.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. I won't spend too much time on him, but people that have seen him grow in the Essendon side, he's just gone from strength to strength. And this year I anticipate him taking another step and really being one of the senior members, taking on a lot more responsibility through the midfield. Someone that's underrated though, Swizz, and that's Xavier Dersmer out in the wing. He is work rate 101. He just works the lines up and back, puts his body on the line. He's quite good overhead. He's quite big. Like, people underestimate how tall he is. I reckon he's 6'2" or 6'3", maybe even a bit taller. But he just works the line so well. And Essendon was such a better side last year with him in there. And it was by no coincidence that when he went down injured that Essendon started to struggle. Yeah,
for sure. And this is where a little bit, like, I know people don't like using the word tanking and finishing down the bottom and stuff, and it gets a bit of a dirty discussion, this. But his brother is in line to go top 5 this year. He's been touted for that for 2 years. And
he's unbelievable.
Beauty. I don't think he goes 1 because I feel like always the midfielder is more likely to go 1. But if everything goes to plan, he's going to be in that mix for a pick 2 or 3, and a great sort of tall halfback, great kick. And I'm sure the Bomber supporters, if was the case where either yourself or Melbourne finished down the bottom, you'd love to have that partnership from halfback to wing with the two Dersmer brothers.
Absolutely. We got a very inexperienced half forward line, Swizz, with Perkins, Caddy, and Kako. I see a much improved year. Like, not that last year was bad for Caddy, but without Stringer there, I see this being a much more open forward line. And you got Perkins, Kako, Wright, Langford, Gresham. They all appear, from watching the Essendon Footy Club, they play off each other. They don't run into each other's space and don't run into each other's lines. So if someone leads, they run out of the space. They create space for someone else to lead into. When Stringer was there, and I don't want to hate on the bloke because he's not there anymore, but it was a little bit of selfish footy when he was up there and sort of crowded the forward line a little bit. So with Caddy up around the half forward line, I anticipate a 30 to 35 goal season out of Caddy this year. Kako, we've seen the highlights from him. Loves a chase down tackle, loves a goal, can use the ball on either side of the foot, really good below his knees. Supercoach-wise, inconsistent, but he'll be very, very exciting for Essendon supporters this year. And Archie Perkins, I hope he gets some time on the ball, because when he did get time, I think it was 2 years ago, he looked really, really good in there and there was a couple of games where he got 20, 25 touches, and you're like, yeah, this guy's our future here. But because of the Durham, Merritt, Caldwell trio that we've got through there, and then Parrish has been in there in the past, it sort of nullified his chance to have a real good crack in there. But as a rotating on ball, I see him taking another step this year as well.
Yeah, for sure. And the good thing, like Kako and Caddy went to school together. So they've already got that relationship, played school footy. They're going to be good mates. So I think, I think Caddy's even actually spoke about that he's really excited to have his good mate next to him in that forward line. The big lead up, centre half forward with the little dog mongrel Waitman, Ginnivan, somebody who's just going to get in the player's face and, probably give it a bit of that spark in the forward line. And talking to a couple of Bombers supporters, you haven't had that sort of since Tipper was around, the chase and the tackles. So it does play a little bit slightly different there, but so many teams, you look at those players that they have and it gets the fans up and about, gets them excited. And I think Kako is going to become a big fan favourite very quickly.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then we've got in the full forward line, Jade Gresham, loves the Joe the Goose out the back, loves just getting over the back of the pack and get to the easy ones. Not too bad up around the ball, but he's starting to get a bit older now. Langford, I quite like him as a full forward. So he started as a halfback, then played through the midfield, and now he's settled up forward. He was a bit of a Mr. Fix-It for us for a couple of years there, but I think full forward's his best spot. He's a really nice kick at goal. He's got a nice set of hands out on the lead. And 2 metre Peter, I'm probably going to cop some hate for him being in the forward pocket here in Essendon's best 23, but take away last year. So he broke his collarbone, was that right? Came back, got suspended.
Yes.
Got suspended for 4 weeks for his hit against, I reckon it was Harry Cunningham against Sydney, and he wasn't the same player after that. The year before that, he won our Best and Fairest medal. So with a clean preseason, with a good chunk of footy behind him, for him to get his confidence up with no stringer there clogging space in the forward line, I'm not saying that he's going to get back to being that 50-goal-a-year goal kicker, but I think there's going to be big improvement out of Peter Wright this year. How much? I'm not sure, but he needs a chance.
Yeah, I think it's more the case that whoever's down there, and I've played around with Brian playing the forward line, and I know Draper's been practicing a lot more forward. Be it whoever, it's there to support Caddy for this year. You can't have a player that age taking on that much load in his second season. So I think, there's enough history there. I think Caddy's going to have a definitely improvement, but he still needs that bigger body to somebody to take one of the key defenders, because if you had just the case where it was Langford and Caddy and no one else around them, he's getting, as I said earlier, Sam Taylor, Harris Andrews, you'll learn a lot. But his confidence is going to get shot pretty quickly because, these guys are just, Jacob Wiedering, they're just champion players in the league. So you do need to have someone there, and you're not going to let Peter Wright, who's, as you said, on his day, he has kicked 7 goals in a game before. He can, he's a good overhead mark.
He's a really good set shot too.
Set shot as well. They're not going to disrespect him by throwing in that 3rd or 4th tool on somebody like that. They're going to, so I do think it makes Caddy's job easier. And because we do still have this sub rule, which, I've never been a huge fan of, it's not out of the question where you can go, okay, it's be a Wright or a Brian, if they were going to go that tall, sub 1 at 3/4 time to bring speed on, as long as you haven't had the injury go down. And the other part to it as well, I think we've got to remember, some of these Bombers backmen sort of built with sticky tape. Ridley, Redmond, Reed, unfortunately.
And that's been generous. Yeah,
and it's not uncommon with them going down with injury. So potentially that extra tall, as much as I don't want to see Langford being the one that swings back, but he's usually the obvious one. If the, God forbid, the worst thing does happen early in the game, the extra tall does allow flexibility with that, where, if you're a bit short, then you sort of now we've got to try to get Perkins to play tall, somebody to play tall. And we've seen teams lose games because of that.
That's right. Through the midfield, this year's going to be an interesting season for Sammy Draper, Swizz. So we know it's a contract year. He's an Adelaide boy. He's been linked back to the Adelaide Crows. I think it's going to heavily depend on how he starts the year. So if he starts the year well, and the contract obviously is to his liking, he'll sign. But if he struggles a bit early on, then we may well see, because they are taking a liking to Nick Bryan, does he then get pushed into that ruck role and then, Draper ends up on the way out. So there's a lot to watch here for Essendon in the ruck department. Remembering that Vicente, I think Dylan Vicente, is in the twos as well. And they've been raving about him, 6'8", playing as a key back at the moment. They're really liking what he's doing down there. So there's another option that they can rotate through there as well. And then you've got the two guns. Jai Caldwell, just an absolute superstar. Fun fact, an absolute champion boxer when he was a junior. Swizz could have boxed for Australia but chose the footy line. And Zach Merritt, probably one of the most underrated captains in the AFL. Being an Essendon supporter, you just don't hear the love for Zach Merritt as you do for, your Scott Pendleburys or, anyone else. But I think he leads by example. He doesn't lead by words. He's a quieter bloke, but yeah, he's just awesome.
But I've got on the record before, and I cop heat for this, and I'm happy to cop it. I've always liked Zach Merritt more than Pendles, but it's just a bit of bias there. He's one of my favourite players in the competition, and I don't think it's any secret that I'm not the biggest fan of Essendon as a team. That's probably my biggest rival, and I've gone through that in other podcast reasons for that before. But in regards to going to the amount of Essendon games that I can't say dragged along to, but the minute I go, I do spend a lot of time watching Zachy Merritt play because I love the guy.
Yeah, he's awesome, and really, really nice fella as well. Interchange, we've got El Hawley. Some people might dispute that, but I'm going to give you another take on that. Parrish, Sardis, and Bryan. So El Hawley is something that Essendon have lacked. He's got dare, he's got pace, he's got ball use, and he's not afraid to run the lines. So there's going to be games where, your Redmonds or your Ridleys or your Shields even might be down a little bit. You can move this guy onto a wing, onto a halfback. Before he did his ankle, I think he had ankle syndesmosis back end of last year, he kicked 5 goals and had 25 touches in the VFL, and that was at three-quarter time. So he knows where to find the sticks as well. So I'm not saying he's a Mr. Fix-It because he hasn't played a game of AFL before, but he's able to play a variety of roles. And I feel like the wing or the halfback position might be best for El Hawley. And it's just that dare that Essendon have lacked for a long time, dare I say, since the last Sard was in the team, that we probably need.
Yeah, no disagreement here, mate.
Yeah, and then Parrish and Sardis, you said it at the top of the show, mate. Probably one of them get picked, and I think you're right. Darcy Parrish has barely trained at all this preseason. Sardis has trained like a house on fire. He's got something to prove into his third preseason. So he's starting to build the body for an inside midfielder. His hands are good. According to training reports, his kicking is really cleaned up, which is the one big knock that people had on him. So if he cleans that up and he finds a spot in our best 23 to start with, then happy days. I think it's definitely the way forward for Essendon. And when you look in Durham, Caldwell, Merritt's getting on a bit, but then Sardis as well. There's a core group of young players that will lead Essendon for the next 8 to 10 years through the midfield. And then we've already spoken about Nick Bryan, the interchanging ruckman that they're really, really happy with. He's come on a bit this preseason as well. Again, another preseason in the body. It's a wonder what a full preseason of no injuries can do for a person's not just fitness, but their confidence. And it looks like he's doing really well at training. And for me, I hope he plays. He's got that ability he's got a good vertical leap. He's athletic. He uses the ball quite well for a big guy as well. We've seen him at centre bounces being able to rove his own ball and kick the ball forward and move the ball forward. So even if Sammy Draper's having a bad day, having him there, it might just be the thing to kickstart his career into more permanent senior footy.
Yeah, I really like the Bryan move in the ruck. I think that's the way Essendon goes forward. I know Draper's an excitement machine. He's just erratic out in the field, gets the fans up and about. But as a number one ruck, I know he's probably hitting his peak now as a 26-year-old, but I don't see him as being one of the premier rucks up against some of the other beasts that are in the competition. And usually, the record is like he sometimes can put on a defensive sort of game against some of the other ones, but a few of the stats I know some people hit me up about saying, we weren't as bad as a ruck combo as you thought last year. Well, you did have Todd Goldstein playing in a lot of those games, kind of to protect sort of Draper, which I think Goldstein's now more playing as that as that coach to help sort of continue to develop those young tools, especially Brian. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if Draper was to go back to Adelaide at the end of the season. It's another potentially decent pick that you could do something with, be it. I think the big thing the Bombers are hoping for is that bundle up and maybe chase Harley Reid, which is not completely out of the question depending on what sort of you could put together. But at the same time, even if it is draft focused, I think between Brian and some of these younger players, or even if it's still Peter Wright playing second ruck going forward for a couple of years, there's options there. And I think that would probably hold you better instead. Where I just think Draper's never. He just kind of reminds me of those. You think about maybe like your Reece Stanley kind of ruck who, he's going to have to just put his body there, put it. Hopefully he can get forward and kick a goal or two to give some pressure the other way. But absolutely get monstered still by your Gawns, your Grundys, now your Cherries. These guys are absolute elite ruckmen. And I don't think he's in that anywhere near that class.
No, I think you're right. When you're looking at the stats from last year, Swizz, Essendon were the best when we're talking about ruck points against, when we're talking fantasy or Supercoach. So they were the hardest team to score against. But you nailed it. It was because Goldstein was in the side, and he's just very good at using his body, nullifying his opponents, protecting the drop of the ball, so then our on-ballers could come through and scoop up the crumbs. So this year won't be as good, I don't think, without Goldstein playing and having Draper and Nick Bryan there. They're not the bigger body rucks. I think you missed one, and he's your own Nank. I put him in the elite when we're talking ruckman in the competition as well. These guys aren't at that. So, again, it's not a chemistry thing for Draper. He's been in the team for, 5 years now. He needs to really take that step forward if he wants to be seen as an elite ruckman in the competition, which, some people like his flair. Some people don't. I'd rather him concentrate on just being the best ruckman he can instead of, doing push-ups over the ball when we win by a point in a game that doesn't mean much. So
there's a little bit of the funny part about it, because he obviously did go on that podcast. He was correct about the players walking out of the Bulldogs. He's going to cop it 12 months later if he then walks out of a club after he was having that discussion. But I don't think he'll mind that. He's a different unit. Exciting again for the Bombers fans, no doubt about that. But at the same time, you're there to win games, and
that's right.
I think there's Brian's probably the better one for the future for that.
For sure.
Well, and I think the sub, I don't know if we covered Archie Roberts, but I kind of like what I saw from him last year.
Exciting. Yeah. Loves the hard ball, runs. He's got a good tank. Another year in the system. He'll break in and have games again this year. I feel like it's probably going to be between him and All Hawley when we're talking the wing or the half-back spot, which I see both of them rotating through. So it all depends on, one, whether Jordan Ridley's ready for the start of the year. But then if he's not, that's probably Jackson Pryor, who's just signed at Brisbane as well. He's a good left footer, marks the ball well overhead, good user of the ball, a bigger body as well. I think he's 6'3", 6'4", so he's a bigger guy. Michael Pryor, for those of you old enough to remember, Michael Pryor, who played at Essendon in the late 90s, early 2000s, played with us for a couple of years. So, he'll be nice as well as a depth player. But, it'll be between All Hawley and Roberts for that last spot in the 23, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I think he's a good pickup there. It's adds a bit of depth, which you need. And sort of does allow a couple of other guys to continue to develop. I think that's a good pickup, and he's in the right age. Jackson Pryor's 23 years old, so it's not like you've brought in another 28, 29-year-old as replacement there. He's got time to continue to develop as a group, and I think you hope he doesn't play many games, but I think it's an upgrade for the Laverty, who's Pryor and Laverty are practically the same height. So,
yep, there you go. And then, the likes of, we haven't named Laverty on here. We haven't named Setterfield on here. Yeah, they're good players, but we see them being a part of the next succession of finals that Essendon are going to be a part of, whether it's this year, the year after? I'm not so sure. So for me, I'd rather be pumping games into your Sardises and these sorts of kids now, getting them senior experience, getting them acclimatised to AFL footy so they're better prepared to endure a season-long run of AFL footy instead of throwing out our 30, 31, 32-year-olds to finish ninth.
And I think this is similar discussion I've had for those people who haven't obviously watched the other ones because it's more focused on Essendon. It is a common theme when you're doing these club to club. It's like, okay, how do we go from going past these players and they become depth players to improve our list? And it is most people who come on here say the same thing. It's about moving on those. It's not as much list cloggers, but players who you would prefer to be there for emergency, let's break the glass and bring them in more than the fact that these guys are starting in our best 23. Adelaide's a great example of that, where they've had sort of not just Crouch, but, Brodie Smiths and, there's a couple other players in that sort of silk where, they've done a job for a while, filled a hole, but you want sort of younger players coming up and pushing up, and that's like why we've got those likes of Sardis and Al Hawley and Kakos and these guys, because that's that wave to take you forward with guys who are at the right age group to complement them in your Martins and your Perkins and Durhams, Caldwells. Yep. So I think that's sort of the better group. You kind of want a situation where, by the time these guys like Caldwell, say, for example, is 24. So if the proper rebuild, and you're contending in, say, 4 years' time, I think it's a good timeline. And they're sort of right in their prime at 27, 28. These young fellas are then, 22, 23 with between that 50 and 100 games under their belt. And, you still got senior guys then like your Merritts who, the talent in the career, but can play a role that we've seen with the success of Brisbane and Collingwood and these sort of teams with your Zorkos, Neils, Pendles, all those sort of guys who are still highly valuable, but aren't necessarily pulling the weight like they once were, because you've got these other guys who have come through together.
For sure. Yep.
And then just from a more Supercoach perspective, so we know the rookies there, and probably of them, like I like Kako, because I don't see an obvious replacement now, especially with Gulfy out injured for him every week. Yeah, as you said, the scoring will vary depending on how much involvement he does get with the scoreboard and stuff. But if a guy who's a warm body who's going to play every week, I feel like that's him, and can obviously then cover both your forward and midfield. So obviously like him, it's hard with the other players because of the early buy in round 4. But I do know like some people are still looking potentially at like a Zach Merritt. But yeah, it does probably get that little bit harder with premiums outside of sort of the obvious ones with Al Hawley, Kako, Reid. Is there sort of any other Essendon players you've sort of looked at?
Not really, no. So Nick Martin is an interesting watch for me. I think he's 550k defender. If he's playing in and around the ball and getting a lot of it in practice matches and then in round 0, then that'll be a consideration for me. And then you look at, you got your Zach Reids, Kakos. There's probably El Hawley. There's probably not much else going on there. Jackson Pryor, if he plays, he's a 150k defender, someone that may come in, but then job security is not great for him either. So it's either the top of the tree with Martin and Merritt or rookies.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Sardis as well. I think if he gets a good run at it, 100%.
Yeah, and I think Sardis is in that. There's a mix of all those sort of expensive rookies. At least the thing with Sardis is obviously he's been in the system for a couple more years, so that always bodes well. And he is probably that one injury away from really nailing himself. If there was a long-term, so it might not be a guy to start because he might not hurt you. At least you get to have a look in round 0. So the great thing about the Bombers is we get a free look at them. If Sardis sort of, only pumps out sort of maybe a 60 or 70 at his price, you can leave it. But if an injury was to happen, if Parrish went down more long-term, for example, he's the obvious next one in. I think Hobbs has fallen way behind in the pecking order now. So Sardis is the obvious one that you'd have confidence that, he could come in and then take a real strong role around that midfield group.
Mm-hmm. And then you got your Unwin as well, the young rookie that was picked up in the draft. He was really impressive in their intra-club last week. I feel like we're going to see a bit of him in the preseason games as well. He's probably one, alongside Kako, one of the rookies that's really impressed during the preseason.
Yeah, Jaden Newlands is good, and obviously it's more a smaller guy, but maybe it's a case of if he doesn't start, we know injuries happen throughout the season. If he keeps putting his best foot forward, it could be a downgrade option there at some point during the season. But yeah, currently 4% have him in. So yeah, it's a bit of a watch there as well. Yeah, beautiful. Well, I think that covers everything from an Essendon point of view, mate. It's going to be interesting when they that first match sim against the Bulldogs, which I believe is now sold out. So, if you've got access to KO or Foxtel, that's probably the best way to watch it. But
we'll be down there.
So be looking forward to those match reports coming out of the game. I'll be watching that closely from the box because I won't be there. And then into the preseason game with Geelong before round 0. So yeah, an interesting couple of weeks coming up for the Bombers.
Yeah, 100%. Really looking forward to seeing the progression from the young kids this year, especially the duo of Caddy and Kako up forward. But I feel like it's going to be another 365 days until we see another finals win. So Bombers fans, be patient. They are on the right track. I just don't think it's yet.
Yeah, no problems. Well, thank you so much, SC Horse. Do appreciate your insights there. If you want more insights, go to InsightFSports. And it's not just AFL, they cover everything. So definitely check them out if you haven't already. Thanks, mate.
Appreciate it. Look forward to chatting throughout the season.
No problems. As always, continue to support, subscribe our podcast, and check us out for our next team-by-team discussion soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.